Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Abundance Tree Podcast. I'm your host, Janice Luke, and I'm here with my co-host,
April Capri.
April
What's up,
Capri.
y'all?
What's going on? What's going on, April?
I am loving the specs and the navy green. Not navy green, army green. That's not some
Yeah.
green. I'm loving it, Janice.
Girl,
Let's
I guess I
go.
have my nerves came out today, but I still rocking the fro though.
Girl, everything is just giving yes today. I'm
Oh,
loving
you look
it.
nice too, girl. You know you always look nice. That's cute. You look cute today. I love it. I
Thank
love your
you.
hair.
I
Awesome.
got my not today wig because my hair said not today. And I was like, okay.
This is my not today. I just let it go.
No, your not today is cute, girl. This yeah, but it is what it is. We are here.
We
Happy to
both
be here.
beautiful. Yeah, me
Amen.
too.
Yes, definitely. Period.
Period. So we
Period.
have a great guest tonight.
We do. We do. We have an exciting guest. He is a market designer and game theorist dedicated to improving economic systems. With a background in nuclear engineering, he initially ventured into the tech startup space during the peak of the dot-com boom. So, however, his fascination with mathematics and information and computation kind of steered him into a new direction. So his passion accumulated in patents work, I had to say that slow, aimed at designing a more efficient commodity market. His expertise in market design and game theory positions him as a visionary in shaping the future of economic systems. Through his innovative approach, he seeks to create more equitable and efficient markets that benefit society as a whole. Please welcome Mr. Noah Healy.
Right.
Expert in the space. Nuclear engineering sounds really, 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 really deep. Oh my God.
That sounds deep. He's gonna
It
have to take us to
does.
school tonight. Hey
Okay.
Noah, how are you?
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. We were just giving you some flowers for just being a engineer and just really learning your space in and out. That's really remarkable.
Thank you. Yeah, that's effectively why I learned my space in and out. Part of engineering is, the training in professionalism, and the first key of being a professional is knowing what you're talking about.
Awesome.
I
We're so
truly
glad that you
do.
came on tonight with us. So
Absolutely.
thank you
Well,
for
yeah,
joining us.
thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. So we want to know like about your journey, like what's your story?
Uh, Basically, I was born in a small town. I've been here my whole life, and just keep trying things that look reasonable and are interesting. And as a result of that, I'm now involved in a project to change how economics works, which is certainly a little bit more ambitious than I was planning on at any point along the way. But about 10 years ago, I was really just playing around with computational mathematics, which is sort of my vocation and avocation, and ran across a way using game theory to come up with new kinds of communication systems that specifically favor collaboration and agreement. And since the purpose of markets is to bring together people with common interests, this approach allows you to generate new kinds of market designs that are much, much more efficient than the kinds that we've been using for centuries now.
That's a
Okay.
mouthful. What is game theory?
Game theory is the most flippantly named thing probably in the history of people. It is the mathematics of strategy, uh, and these things are regarded as games. Um, Mathematically speaking, games are simply interactions of agents with the ability to make choices. So something like a physics simulator wouldn't be a game, because gravity hopefully isn't making choices about how it functions on a basis. But quite literally anything where two or more things have options, games become important. And so whether they're competitive or cooperative or a mixture, there's certain features that exist once you have more than one point of view in a system. And mathematically, that's how we think about it.
Is it based on
Wow.
kind of like probability
Yeah, I was
or?
about to say like probability.
Interestingly, probability actually comes out at the end. So for an example of a probabilistic game, think about rock, paper, scissors.
Okay.
So the first thing we would do with something like rock, paper, scissors, we say, okay, there's three pure strategies. There's throw rock, throw paper, throw scissors. And if you think about it, if you don't know what your opponent's going to do, any one of those strategies is fine. You could just throw rock every single time you played rock, paper, scissors. And if your opponent's, you'll beat the ones that are throwing scissors, you'll lose the ones throwing paper, you'll draw. But if you're playing it over and over again, your friend group is kind of going to figure out what you're doing, and they're going to start exploiting that. And so the solution then is what's called a mixed strategy, and that's where probability comes in. The concept behind mixing strategies is trying to get to a point where you're not exploitable. So if I throw rock every time, I'm really easy to exploit because you start noticing I'm throwing rock every time and you just, throw the other thing. But if I throw rock half the time and paper half the time, I'm a little bit less exploitable. I'm still pretty exploitable. If you just permanently throw paper, you'll either win or draw. Um, but if I throw rock, a third of the time and paper half the time and scissors a sixth of the time, I'm getting to be less exploitable still, but I'm still exploitable. There's some mix of probabilities you could go that would give you a better than even chance in this game. But if I get all the way around to the point where I'm one third, one third, one third, I become unexploitable. And while I can still lose because the game's fair, um, there's nothing you can do to get yourself to win more than about a third of the time, draw more than about a third of the time, and you'll win about a third of the time. And so what we do, generally speaking, in game theory is we start from these pure strategies and we derive probabilities.
Okay. So does
Okay.
this translate into like business strategy? You mentioned marketing, I think earlier, right? So
Marketplaces, yeah, absolutely.
okay.
So one of the intriguing qualities of game theory is something called evolutionary game theory, and this actually goes into evolutionary niches. There's things like predator prey models, and we see this occur in biological systems. Um, if instead of individual players, you have roles. So
Okay.
again, think about like, an open grassland, and you've got some players that are plants that are trying to grow, and some players that are herbivores that are eating plants, and some players that are carnivores that are eating herbivores. Um, how should each of those roles play their strategy? And what you'll see is that if an ecology stabilizes, each one will have its own particular, probability. Basically, most of the living creatures in this system will be plants, and then there'll be about a tenth that number of creatures that are herbivores that are eating the plants, and then there'll be another tenth of those creatures that are carnivores that are eating the herbivores. And if you truck in a bunch of extra big cats, then the system will go wild and crazy, and they'll collapse the number of herbivores, which will then spike the number of plants and collapse the number of carnivores, which will then spike the number of herbivores. There's a bunch of food, and there aren't any carnivores anymore because they starved to death because there weren't enough herbivores. And then, it'll eventually get itself back into some kind of relatively stable arrangement. Um, But what gets really exciting is that once there's more than a few players, there's models where it never gets back to a stable arrangement. It just keeps going crazy over and over again. What what I'm working with is how to design those models so that they not only have stable positions that they approach, but those stable positions are economically valuable. And most importantly, people make money by stabilizing them. So the condition where as somebody that makes things, you know how much it's worth to make those things, and you know how much it's going to be worth to make those things for the next month and next year, is the position where you can plan your business. You can decide whether or not it's time to invest in, increased capacity and so on. And so creating a market where finding out not only what's going to be available today, but what the plan is for what's going to be available in the future is how people make money. Then we get this situation where individuals can plan their own lives in ways that make them the greatest economic return, and that's what also makes the marketplace its greatest economic return.
Wow. Oh, so is it kind of like predictive, I guess in the sense of like one action affects another in the terms of finances and economics?
There's an aspect to that, yes. So the problem with just trying to come up with a predictive algorithm is that lots and lots of people have an effect on it. So, for
Mm.
example, um, weather prediction is something that we've been getting better and better at over the years, but it's very hard to get very good at because weather's a very unstable. It's one of those sort of permanently unstable types of problems. But right now, or right a few weeks ago, uh, we had a multi-billion-dollar global system that had supercomputers, and it could, over the course of a day, calculate a 10-day forecast. And that 10th day wasn't really that good, but it was better than guessing. And when
Okay.
I was a kid, we barely had 3-day forecasts. So, 10's a lot better than that. A few weeks ago, one of Google's teams open sourced a project that's small enough to fit on a single like cloud server. So anybody who wants to go download it and buy a cloud server for a few bucks can. Those information sources, they cost billions of dollars to produce, but they're public and open. This thing will calculate a 10-day forecast in a minute.
Wow.
And right now, it appears to produce slightly better 10-day forecasts than the existing supercomputer model that takes a day.
Hmm.
Um, but, and I've recently written an article about this. We'll see where it winds up going. That set of facts now means that it's possible to use that to change what's going on. So it, because of the way AI systems work, it's possible to take a given AI model and put it into a certain kind of program harness to train up an anti-AI model, if you will, that will try to figure out precisely how to derange the first model as inexpensively as possible. And so, in this regard, it would be possible to work out how to change a few, wind speed or temperature predictions someplace on Earth in order to cause people who are trying to predict the weather to predict the weather incorrectly. And since there's 8 billion people and weather prediction is a multi-billion-dollar industry that's worth hundreds of billions to possibly trillions of dollars globally, there's a lot of potential motive for getting infected and being able to make moves in that regard. And that's the kind of issue that we haven't had to think about as a species. Most of the information that's been generated about weather over the last century and a half or close to century and 3/4 at this point, has been done so voluntarily. And it's been basically honest because really there's no motive to lie. And the only people involved are interested and public spirited. But, just recently we worked out a way that anyone that had a bad intent could come up with a plan to exploit that bad intent. Uh, and we'll see what happens now.
My goodness, that's scary because with all the AI that's out right now, and we just hope and pray that people are using it in the right way. But you just, I don't
Good
know.
intentions,
It's good.
yeah.
It's good and potentially bad. I don't know. So,
Well, so the issue is that people really have their tenses wrong. ChatGPT has become quite famous over the course of the last year, but we've been plugging artificially intelligent systems into our marketplaces, into our governments, into our into our search engines. Our search engines are artificial intelligence agents. We've been doing this for decades.
Yep.
In the case of markets, for closing in on half a century now. And that's one of the primary reasons why markets are so much crazier today than they were, say, in the 80s or the 50s. Um, uh, there's something called the Turing test, which is sort of a test of AI, whether or not what it produces isn't distinguishable from people. And there's people that go on ChatGPT and ask it some questions and say, well, this doesn't look like what comes from a person, but that's not really how you do the test. There's other people who have generated some stuff from ChatGPT and gone and asked sort of random strangers, hey, do you think this was me or ChatGPT? And sometimes they say they're right and sometimes they're wrong. And that's getting closer to how you're supposed to conduct the test. But while the ability to produce speech and text in ways that sound and look human is very impressive, the ability to produce highly constrained things in ways that look and sound human is much easier. And so the ability to bid into the market, or click some things in a poll question in the government, or fill in some stuff in a web page, uh, that are check boxes. Computers have been able to do those things for quite some time, and they do those things. And we have we have you know we have government officials that get elected and are responsive to humans communicating with them through a wide variety of means. What if, instead of being inundated by a actual constituents that suddenly got upset, you got inundated by computerized, telephone calls, which sound exactly like your actual constituents, but are much cheaper to produce and can be generated much more rapidly. Uh, and even aside from that, Twitter storms, we've seen botnets become national issues in multiple elections for quite a few election cycles at this point. So while there's some really crazy implications and new capabilities are coming out every day, uh, we've been living with this stuff for more than a quarter of a century at this point, and we're seeing the signs of the decay of these systems we depend on all over the place. Uh, Farmers have never had it worse, and unit land productivity has never been higher in human history. How does that add up? Well, it
Mhm.
adds up because markets have become better and better at figuring out how to push their customer base to the very edge of what they can tolerate. And that's a function of managing information flows, which is what computers are good at. And the markets, as they're presently set, have no incentives to do anything other than that. So as computers continue to get more and more powerful, the farmers will get pushed further and further to the edge.
Mm.
Wow, that's scary too, because that's scary because we definitely need our farmers, in my opinion. So we don't.
Yeah, I don't eat all the food that I produce. You know, I eat more
Yeah,
food than I produce by a long chalk. So yeah, and that I don't just need farmers. I need people to
yeah,
make clothing for me. I don't buy
yeah,
my own books. Like
yeah,
I'm part of a general system, and I'm happy for other people to also be part of that system. And so that's why by changing the incentives to restabilize things and make productivity valuable rather than just the ability to manipulate information, that's the real key that we're going to need to very much recenter, because we've been sort of getting a lot of freebies because as people, you know, we're pretty small, we're pretty dumb, we're pretty slow, we're pretty weak. That's in the Greek myths, Prometheus and his brother, it was like Ephebius or something. His brother was like retrograde. We're building all the animals, and his brother gave all the gifts that the gods had away before they got to people. And so Prometheus was making people last because he really liked them. And when he got done, he was like, okay, where's the fur? Where's the claws? Where's what? There's nothing left. And so then he had to go, steal fire and give us intelligence. And so yeah, we just have to use that productively, and I think we'll probably be okay.
yeah. I hope so, because
I
this
would
stuff
hope
is
so.
scary. Yeah,
It is.
because it's scary. It could be the AI could be used in positive ways, though. I mean, I'm using like ChatGPT for things and stuff, but it's just you just never know what people that have ill intent, and that you can put someone's face on something, that kind of stuff, but
there's
that,
there's a
that
there's a lot of positive that are available. There's been some pretty major scientific breakthroughs. The number of known stable crystals has gone up by a factor of 5 in the last 6 months, and that happened because of one AI running for a few hours. Um, uh, Various games have been cracked. So chess, Go, poker, Stratego, diplomacy are all board games of differing levels of popularity that now have game AIs that are significantly stronger than people are. And one of the results of that is that we ourselves are also getting better at these games. Top level chess players can learn things about chess that human beings never figured out by watching these super AIs play each other in these ridiculously high level games.
Hmm.
wow,
Um,
yeah,
and so this is a option that is also now available to us in other domains. The degree to which we can work out things about how to do things like laying out your city to make traffic flow better, um, or laying out your police routes to minimize the amount of time that any particular place might not have a cop on the beat, or almost anything else that might involve the management of resources in a constrained area under constraints, are the kinds of problems that game AI type AIs could become very, very good at. And so it would be possible to learn new things about architecture, or city design, or other types of things that again are very valuable to us in general terms. Um,
Totally.
yeah,
I think it's a very thin and blurry line right now. I think because, like you said, like it's been around for like decades, just the technology, but the way that it's being presented to people, just to normal people that don't really know like a lot of the technical side of it. I think it's a really thin line between using AI and feeling like you're going to be replaced by AI. And I think that's the big issue now because it can definitely be used for good things, but it's gonna that may be somebody else's job to be a chess teacher or something like that. Now they don't need them. And I think that's been like the big issue with it
That's
too.
that's a that's a very common concern, and it's something that we get into on a podcast that I co-host called The Fourth Age. But I was on another podcast. My prediction actually for the jobs that are sort of most likely to be done away with by AI is C-suite jobs like CEOs, those types of things. And we're already starting to see um, there's a lot more large company CEOs in the news these days than there was when I was a kid. When I was a kid, maybe Lee Iacocca was, because he was in front of Congress begging them to give him money so he could bail out GM. But these days, presidents of movie studios and tech companies and pharma, it seems like everybody has to go onto Congress to explain their latest atrocities on a regular basis. And even when that
Yeah.
doesn't happen, the news is constantly talking about these people making this deal or making that deal. And again, AI greatly increases the cognitive load that's involved in being a CEO on the one hand, because now basically anybody on earth can, you know, fake you doing anything they feel like and create like some kind of firestorm you have to deal with, or magnify their own voice to the point where you know some person's singular opinion is now a general movement that has 250,000 people behind it that you now have to answer questions about that you weren't expecting at the stockholder meeting. But at the same time, those jobs, the jobs that don't involve moving things around the natural world but instead involve absorbing information and making good decisions, are exactly the kinds of jobs that it's easiest to train AIs to be good at. So we're going to have kind of a push pull. And just like kings and queens and princesses didn't do particularly well out of the industrial age, I'd imagine that the leaders of the late industrial age now are going to have the hardest time making the leap to whatever kind of digital computational societies that we're going to need to build in order to actually get away with using this stuff usefully.
Well, very interesting. Wow.
It
I
is.
never thought of it that way. Like
Me either.
the
You
upper
always think it's
level.
going to hit the ground floor first, but
Right, like the
I heard that
workers. Yeah.
perspective.
The the thing is, that's very much how the focus presently goes. So the probably the most common job replacement tale that we're told is drivers, that we're going to have self-driving cars any old day now. They've been announcing that they already have self-driving cars right now, this instant, ready to roll for 5 or 6 years now. And I still drive my car. But the thing is, self-driving cars is a really, really hard problem. It's a lot easier to train an AI to be your doctor than your taxi driver. It's a lot easier to train it to run the company that you're invested in than it is to train it to drive trucks for the company that you're invested in. So what we're doing, what these leaders who have decided to throw their money in this particular direction are doing, is basically guaranteeing that if they actually manage to succeed, the day the first self-driving car actually demonstrates that it can self-drive, it will simultaneously demonstrate that we don't need doctors or lawyers or MBAs for anything anymore, because the capacity to do all those things will already been figured out.
Wow.
And that doesn't strike me as the best strategy. I think baby steps and low hanging fruit is the way to go. And so taking people off the top of society is going to be the easy thing to do. But whichever direction we decide to go with this thing, that's sort of what it's at hand. And there's a lot more value, as with my system right now. In this country alone, we spend around $1 trillion a year just figuring out who's going to grow what and who they're going to sell it to. And if we were spending $100 billion a year doing that, there'd still be an awful lot of money for an awful lot of highly skilled financial professionals, but there would also be $900 billion a year to increase the rate at which our economy grew.
Right. Make it make sense. The mismanagement of the money, the waste. I don't know if that's intentional sometimes because it's just so blatantly stupid, or just unnecessary. So, I think, well, I hope that AI can definitely bridge some of those gaps.
There's enormous scope for that. Um, it's a much harder problem, but I pick on medicine a lot uh, because it's even more expensive. And again, it's the kind of thing that AI is good for.
Mm,
So, an example I've tried it out many times. We know for a fact that we can build a machine that can read an X-ray better than we can train any human being to read X-rays. We also know for a fact that because of the way we currently know how to train those machines, we really can't use them as X-ray techs. It would be wildly irresponsible. They the way we validate is purely past based. So it would have been a better idea in any given instance, but that doesn't mean that it's durably a better idea in the future to do so. But that's a solvable problem. And if we solved that problem, then we would be able to much, much improve the outcomes while simultaneously much dropping the costs. And we don't spend $1 trillion a year on medical care. We spend multiple trillions of dollars a year on medical care. And if that number turned into 100 billion, then multiple trillions of dollars a year could be flowed back through into people's pocketbooks, be able to be used to build better worlds. And that kind of thing would really change the way our society was put together. Um, my project, if it goes into general circulation, doubles human wealth, which is that's a big deal.
a huge deal.
There's other professions that are even more expensive, and disrupting those has an even more profound effect on how rich we could all eventually become.
Wow. That's
So in
very
a
interesting.
nutshell, your your system or your product does economically, it solves economic issues or deficiencies or deficits. It kind of points out how you can spend less and retain more. How do you use that?
Well, I'm an IP shop, so I'm licensing this out to people in the financial industry that would
Okay.
actually have the capacity to launch marketplaces, to be able to build marketplaces that actually make them more money than the traditional form of markets. Right now, setting up markets is a fairly inexpensive business that, or a fairly expensive business that doesn't actually offer a great deal of remuneration. I'd mentioned before that in this country alone, we spend around $1 trillion on figuring out who's going to grow what and where they're going to send it. The people that operate the marketplace that's doing that figuring out are earning about 4 billion of that $1 trillion. So their takeaway is less than 0.5%. In my system, not only could they build markets that we're doing a much better job and cost significantly less than $1 trillion. But as I said, you could drop the market overhead from, say, 1 trillion to 100 billion and still have room to raise their revenues from 4 trillion to 40 trillion. And there'd still be $60 trillion of squish that was available for incentives under those kinds of numbers. So the numbers at great scale are basically ridiculous. Uh, but that's the challenge, is finding people that actually want to take on the incumbent players, Most of my clients are located around the world and are looking to build indices or other kinds of markets in places that are really underserved and effectively don't have market access right now.
Wow, that's so major. I didn't realize that that's exactly what it was. That's really
Yeah,
salute to you, sir. That's dope.
right. That is cool. Yeah.
Yeah. You created that?
Yeah. Well, it sounded like an interesting problem to think about, and then it turned out to be a revolutionary idea. And then after I'd load tested it, it turned out to be an inexpensive revolutionary idea. Um, Inexpensive being a very relative term, I'm sorry to say. But most $1 trillion ideas don't cost like $10 million. Uh, Sam Altman of ChatGPT is apparently currently on a kick to try to raise $7 trillion from various world governments to introduce a new kind of computer chip architecture to make AI training more effective. Um, and he says that, giving him $7 trillion is going to revolutionize the technological scene and uncap untold new wealth. And
Of course it will.
if you gave me $7 trillion, I bet I could have a lot of effect on things as
Yeah,
well.
right. I know.
But yeah, but I can have a lot of effect on things with a lot less money than that.
No,
Wow,
that's
that's
right.
amazing. So, where can people find you to connect with you?
Uh, I'm primarily on LinkedIn, although if people wanted to reach out, they can. My email, noahphealy@yahoo.com, Noah Healy on LinkedIn. I have a website that describes my marketplace and its ideas, CoordDisc, COORDISC. As I mentioned previously, I'm on this podcast, The Fourth Age. We just dropped episode 11, and we're going to try to really churn these things out on schedule for a while. So let's see what goes on with that. And I've started a petition. As it happens, the patent office is behaving in ways that they have apparently never behaved in the history of our country, with my patent. And so there's a petition up on change.org. It's all caps CDM underscore all lowercase patent. And I'd very much appreciate anybody who would like to sign or support. It would help me out tremendously.
Oh, wow. Are you
Very
trying to get your
good.
patent?
So I got my first notice of acceptance in 2019, and they then violated ordinary patent procedure by ignoring that notice of acceptance. So we applied, and then they didn't give us the patent.
Mm.
And then they said, we have to take that back, but we don't know why yet. And then they said, okay, yeah, this is the reason. It's because 1 = 2. And then they were like, oh, right, that's right. After we had to point it out to them that 1 doesn't equal 2. So they gave me another notice of acceptance. Uh, and then 3 weeks later, they said, well, we've been told we have to withdraw this one. So we're doing that, and we'll get back to you. And then they got back
Mm.
to us and said, the people that told us we had to withdraw, we can't really understand what they said. So here's
Oh,
some
no.
nonsense. And we're not gonna, like, this is nonsense. We know it's nonsense. So we're not gonna reverse ourselves just because you tell us that this is nonsense this time,
Oh,
because
no.
we already know it's
Yeah,
nonsense. So
We definitely hope that works out. We're about to end.
yeah.
Really
Thank you so
appreciate
much for
you
coming
coming
on,
on.
though.
thank
Yeah,
you. Great being here.
Awesome. Thank you
awesome.
guys for watching.
Thank you. Y'all have a great night.
Have a good night.
Bye bye.
Bye.